Welcome to Spirits Podcast, a boozy dive into mythology, legends, and folklore. Every week we pour a drink and learn about a new story from around the world. I'm Amanda.
And I'm Julia.
We are so honored to be joined by one of my favorite contemporary writers. It's Deanna Raybourn. Deanna, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
We were so stoked that you said yes. So can you, for our audience who may not be familiar with you, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Sure. I am a transplanted Texan. I live in Virginia. I have been writing for, I think I've been published for about 16, 17 years now. My 20th book is getting ready to come out.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I write both Victorian mystery and contemporary thriller. The contemporary thriller side of things is new. I'm only getting ready to launch my second one in that vein, but it's been incredibly successful. I'm excited to do more with that.
And that is where I want to start because I am so interested, in promoting people picking up Killers of a Certain Age and Kills Well with Others, the first book in the series, which I highly recommend. And it follows a group of women with a lot of life under their belts, women who are a little bit older than I think a typical protagonist, especially in a thriller genre. Can you tell us a bit about what made you so excited to kind of approach this brand new genre in thrillers, this new setting of contemporary? And though we have lots of women in all kinds of age ranges in the Veronica Speedwell novels that I think are fabulous, what made you focus on women older than you by quite a lot?
You know what? I fell into it accidentally. And they're not older than me by quite a lot. Bless your heart. Because I'm 56 and they're 60. So it's a very tiny road. No, my publisher actually came to me and said, we were having a chat around the boardroom table. And the subject came up. Why do we not have more projects about older women doing kick-ass things? Because you think about it, when you have 60-year-old women kind of at the center of a story, a lot of times it's, oh, I just got a breast cancer diagnosis, or, oh, my child is having trauma, or, oh, my parent is having trauma, or, oh, I've had a late in life divorce and now I'm trying to, have an orgasm for the first time ever. Mm-hmm. It very seldom is it this age of woman going out and like really affecting some incredible change and doing something just stupidly badass. And so they asked me because apparently my name came up immediately, which I was super flattered that they thought that I could kind of do this idea justice. So they came to me and asked me if I'd be interested. And I thought about it for a hot second. Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. But I'd had a week to think about it at this point. And I said, I'd like there to be 4 of them. He said, great, no problem. I said, I'd like for them to be assassins. And they said, great, we love that. And I said, and I would like for it to be contemporary. And that was really the moment where like everything stopped. Like there was dead silence on the other line, on the phone line for about 10 seconds before my editor said, okay, we'll trust you with this, because publishers love a pigeonhole. If you write something and you write it well and it is successful, my little comfort zone had been Victorian mystery, and I was good at it and it was successful. And, publishers don't love to let you launch out of that. It's very much a risky behavior in their industry, and they are mm-hmm. notoriously risk averse at times. So the fact that they let me do it was just the most massive vote of confidence. And then I went off and had to figure out how to do it. And that was oh shit, what have I gotten myself into? Because I had to figure out how to write with a contemporary voice, which I had never done before. And so I would go off and I'd write a draft and I'd send it to my editor, and she would send it back and say, no, it's not working. And I would cry. And then I would go write a Veronica Speedwell book. And then I would come back and, do another draft. And we did that, for ages, probably about 2 years. I had trouble connecting with what that voice was supposed to be, what that narrative voice would sound like. Because, I hear Veronica Speedwell in my sleep. Like, that girl, I've got that down pat. That is not a problem for me. But this was very different. And, I remember trying to write that first scene, and I don't rewrite when I'm writing. Like, that's not a thing that I do, but I couldn't get the voice. So I had to keep rewriting it until that sort of clicked. And finally, one day I said, oh, screw it. I can't rewrite this again and try to write like with a capital W. I was like, I'm just going to tell it. And so I sat down and just told it on the paper and handed it off to my husband. And he started laughing. And I said, "What's so funny?" And he said, "Babe, this is your Twitter voice." And I went, "Oh, nailed it. That's what I should have been doing," because that was back when Twitter was fun, and, not full of Nazis and shit. And it was very much this kind of much more irreverent, smartass, kind of take no prisoners attitude that came through. And I was like, oh, excellent. And, it helps because the narrative character, Billy, is from Texas, as I am. So if any colloquialisms did sneak in, I was hoping it would kind of go in under the radar.
I love that. Did you end up looking into the mythos of the assassin? One thing that we're really interested in on the show is not just, mythology that you read in a book about, ancient Greece, Rome, etc., but the stories we tell ourselves as a society and the figures and sort of concepts that we allow to take on this, folkloric weight. And I think the assassin is totally one of those.
Yeah. And the thing is, you are actually much likelier to encounter an assassin in folklore or legend or mythology that is a woman than you are in history. Because historically, this is not a job too many women have had. Or if they have, they've gone really far under the radar. Because if you start researching female assassins, that's about 2 minutes on Wikipedia and you're done. It's not, Charlotte Corday, there you go. There's just not a ton out there about this. The funny thing about mythology for me is even if I'm not researching something specific, it informs everything that I write. Because literally the first story I remember reading as a child was Athena and Arachne. I mean, I've got my Athena pendant on. I am hardcore into my mythology girlies. I always have been. I even dug out because I knew I was going to be chatting with y'all.
Yay!
Oh my gosh, that's such a good t-shirt.
Our Greek myths.
The Dolaire Book of Myth. It's like I have this on a t-shirt.
I would stop someone in the street for wearing that shirt and be like, "We should be friends. What's your number?"
I don't know what your deal is, but we should be friends.
Right? I posted about it on social media a couple of years ago. And I was like, okay, who of you Gen Xers had your introduction to mythology from the Dolaire Book of Greek Myths? And immediately, it opened the floodgates of all these other nerds my age going, yes. I remember. And then I found this, which I got. This is Evslin and Hoops, Gods, Demigods, and Demons. So these are characters that have always been with me. But it's really funny that those stories never completely go away. And those archetypes kind of inform everything, even today, in how we look, especially when you're talking about the breakdown of gender roles and what women are supposed to be doing and what makes you a whore or a villain or a monster, as opposed to the right kind of woman. And I didn't even realize myself how present those kind of tropes and stereotypes are until 2018. My husband and I were in Greece and we're in a cab and the driver starts telling me how wonderful he thinks it is that we had the president we had at that time who's getting ready to be reinaugurated. And I'm just sitting there not saying a word. And he's going on and finally I said, why exactly? And he said, well, because of the alternative. He said, you couldn't have Hillary Clinton be president. And I said, why exactly? And he said, because she's too much like Hera. I said, she's too much like Hera. Yeah, she's jealous. She's just, she's too strong of a woman. She's too pushy. She's got her own, she tries to make her own agenda happen. You can't have that. And I went, are you shitting me right now? Really?
I want to sentence diagram out all of the gendered assumptions and language.
Oh my God. And I have a soft spot for Hera. I have a massive Hera statue back behind me on this bookshelf over here because I think she gets a really bad rap. I mean, people tend to forget she was, after all, Queen of the Gods. Yeah. She did some cool stuff. I feel like if Zeus hadn't always been pitting her against other women, we might like her better. But just this idea that, for thousands of years, this idea of this one woman has come down to this cab driver in Athens going, no, just no. And I was like, oh, it doesn't die. It doesn't go away.
We've had these shrill women like stereotypes since ancient mythology, and they still persist to this day. And it drives me absolutely wild when we retell stories like that on the podcast. And I'm like, and then there's a joke about, you know, how women are terrible when you don't give them what they want.
Oh my God. I mean, the word harpy is there for a reason. And I'm sure you guys have covered this in your podcast, where the harpies come from. And it's like, oh Lord, we can't get away from that, can we?
Oh my gosh. But I love that in telling a story of killers of a certain age, I flash back to TV shows like Murder, She Wrote, and even Golden Girls, where I guess in my mind, watching those shows and even rewatching them now, I'm like, yeah, those women, they must have been like, what, in their like 70s and 80s when they were filming that. I'm pretty sure.
Wasn't B. Arthur like 51 or something?
Yeah, B. Arthur was like 50.
B. Arthur was younger than I am now.
And Angela Lansbury, I think, was in her 40s when she filmed Murder, She Wrote. And she's supposed to be this like tiny little old lady. I'm like, that's me in like 15 years. That's not old.
It's fascinating. It's so fascinating to see how aging has changed from, when I was a teenager in the 80s and Golden Girls was like airing for the first time.
Not far off.
Yeah, those were old women. And now that I'm the same age, I'm like, wait a minute, hold up. Hold up. I go to Pilates. My hair is still dark. Calm down. But we have a very different picture of aging now too, because as our life expectancy gets longer, as we have, different therapies, different nutrition, different ways of being, we are able to extend our youth just a little bit. But yeah, that was fascinating to me when I sat down and started looking at older women in entertainment. It turns out most of the time they were not nearly as old as I thought they were. And when I tried to picture, okay, what does 60 look like? What are these women going to look like? It was Jamie Lee Curtis. It was Diane Lane, Marissa Tomei. It's women who, when I was a teenager, they were the hot chicks who were in their early 20s. And now they're hitting 60 and you're like, okay, but they still look amazing. They're not what we think they are. So 60s kind of become this really interesting sort of liminal space where it's not elderly. And yet, if you look at the math of it, it's way past middle age. It's what you make of it, really, is kind of the conclusion that I came to. So I taped a picture of Diane Lane to my computer and just went to town.
Yeah. And I mean, like, Jamie Lee Curtis is doing action and horror movies still. Marissa Tomei is still in superhero movies. Like, these women are so much in our minds younger than the women of their same age 20 years ago, 30 years ago.
Absolutely. And, Marissa Tomei and Diane Lane were two of the people I was thinking of because I remember watching Superman and watching Spider-Man, and here are these vital, dynamic, really gorgeous women standing there. And I'm like, why aren't they superheroes? Where's their movie? When do they get to wear capes? And they don't get capes. And I was like, oh, screw that. We're going to have we're going to have women that age, like, doing that sort of thing. We're going to have them leaping around. Now, my assassins feel it because, like, I can tell you, if I go too hard in the gym the next day, she creaky. And that's just how it is. But you can still do the stuff. You just might have to stretch a little extra beforehand and maybe, pop a little Advil after.
They also desire and are desired, which I really appreciate. And my grandma specifically, who is 85 and has been reading mysteries and romance for the last probably 70 years. She says that she gets so fed up when when there's like elderly women or old women or seniors on the page that like have nothing to do with rich inner lives like she has and experiences. So anytime there is a book that especially has like desire incorporated, that has the fact that, these women, maybe they had, partners pass away or in different situations, but they have life experience, resources, and hopefully several decades in front of them that they want to do something with. It's so energizing. And we definitely don't have those kinds of stories to look to in mythology for the most part. We have crones, right? We have, different like soothsayers or oracles. That's what comes to mind for me of like, who's like older and has agency in mythology? An oracle, I guess, Baba Yaga. But often they straddle this line between hero and villain. It's an othered figure, a witchy woman, a truth teller, someone who lives external to the village, because we really can't conceive of women past childbearing age as the way to sort of render our worth, who get to be protagonists. So Deanna, Julia, as the mythology heads in the room, I love it, but I am not the expert. Are there examples and stories that come to mind that you're stoked about that you would point to as like, that's a kick-ass older woman in mythology?
You bring up a great point, Amanda. And before I let you go away with it, Deanna, I do want to point out like the fact that we do kind of, especially in Greek and Roman mythology, we separate women's lives into the trio, like the three-headed goddess. It's the maiden, the mother, and the crone. So the minute we are past child-rearing age, we are the crone.
That's a crone.
Undesirable woman who, yes, has like wisdom, but also is often portrayed as this like monstrous creature, like this idea of you're no longer beautiful, even though plenty of women past child-rearing age are beautiful. And therefore you are like undesirable and therefore monstrous.
The withered husk is what you get.
Yes.
You get the pomegranate for when you're full of life and you're ripe. And then when that's done, it's like, girl, you're shriveled now, go home. Yeah, you do see that a lot because with that, when you look at that archetypal trinity of maiden, mother, and crone, crone is definitely an afterthought. She's like, okay, the best years are behind you now, because you're always going to find more stories about what happens to the maiden. Mm-hmm. Who's possessing her, who's trying to possess her, who wants to get with her. And then you're going to have some stories about the mother. And then the crone is where it's like, oh, the bard ran out of steam. We're not talking about her.
You're like, no.
But the one older figure that I absolutely adore out of mythology is the Cailleach, the old woman of winter in Celtic mythology. I think she's so fascinating. And I love the fact that even something as mainstream as All Creatures Great and Small on PBS is making reference to her.
Yeah.
We got to see one of the main characters kind of carve an image of the Cailleach as part of the Christmas festivities. And it's been in more than one of their Christmas specials. Mm-hmm. And I love the fact that it's like, oh, okay, so we're finally getting some representation for this incredible character, who exists. And it's kind of what you were talking about, Amanda, where she's on the fringes. She's not really in a village or in society. She's in the woods and you catch glimpses of her, but she's incredibly powerful and she has a raft of stories associated with her. And I think that's I'd love to see so much more of her. Like she needs her own comic book or something, I feel like.
Can you give me her highlights? That this is a new to me figure.
The Cailleach is she's relatively new to me too. Kind of in the same way that Demeter stalks the earth during winter because Persephone is down in the underworld. The Cailleach is roaming the earth during the fallow time when the ground is hard, when the snows are there. That's where you find the Cailleach. She's incredibly powerful. There's always an element of fear associated with her because, of course, wintertime is when more people die. It's when more animals die. It's when you can run out of resources. So you always want to kind of appease her a little bit, and you always want to make sure that you're not offending her. Because there's always that sense. I think in all mythology, when you're talking about a female figure that is powerful, it's, oh, we better not get on her bad side because if we're on the shit list, we're going to pay for it. And she's going to take it out on us because there's always, 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 always underlying everything a fear of female power and female agency.
Mm-hmm.
For male gods, for the Zeuses of the world, of course, it's, oh, their judgment. Oh, they might be unknowable. Oh, they do what they want. It's so venerable how powerful they are. And for women, it really is coded in emotion in a way that, I think your political reference is absolutely apt here. It keeps happening and it stays present.
Yeah. If a woman's pissed at something, it's out of spite or scorn. And whenever a man is angry, it's justified.
It's righteous.
Yeah. Isn't that just the way? Also, shout out to the James Herriot reference there. I loved his books as a kid. So it's nice to hear people talk a little bit more about the TV show and stuff like that.
Oh, it's such a good adaptation.
I have to watch it. I haven't done it yet.
It's fantastic. They're just now dropping season 5. You know that letdown you get after the holidays when you're like, oh, it's gray and grim and now I'm sad. And it's so long until spring. This is the perfect thing to watch.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Ooh, I'm so excited. I'm gonna have to get it on my to watch list. So
you know, I there were moments though when I thought about the gray ones from Greek mythology, when I thought about the fates, when I thought about, you know, the idea of there being these sisters who, you know, kind of measure out the thread of your life. You know, one of them unspins it, one of them measures it, one of them cuts it.
They sure do.
That image kept coming to my head when they would execute somebody, the idea of just snip and cut that thread of life for you. They very much took the power of the fates kind of into their own hands, because they do exist as they're an extra governmental, group. They're very much taking the law into their own hands. They're operating in an incredibly dark gray moral space, because the justification is, oh, we only kill people who need killing, but really who gets to decide that? Although, I mean, we look at the people that kill and we go, they're not wrong. Mm-hmm. So the idea that, you know, you've got these, because that's why the fates, of course, are so feared in Greek mythology, is because they're the ones deciding this. And
yeah.
And in a weird way, you know, my assassins are doing exactly the same thing. So, you know, I think when you're a mythology geek as a kid, I think that stuff just, like I said, I think it just informs everything you do, even when you're not conscious of it. I think it's always there, just kind of like a background song, you know, on repeat.
In my mind, the fates are so they don't care, you know, it doesn't matter what kind of life you're living. It's like, when it's your time, it's your time.
Oh, they don't.
With the assassins, you know, maybe if you were living a better life and you made some better choices, you wouldn't have gotten murdered. I don't know. Just a thought.
They are not at all dispassionate or uninvested in the kind of life that you've led. It is now, they themselves are not the ones who make the decision of who the targets are, but they are very happy to carry out the job when they see the justification and go, oh, you've been trafficking in humans?
Snip, snip.
You're a fascist dictator? On it.
Goodbye.
You know, you were a guard at a Nazi death camp. We're on this.
Ta-ta.
So yeah, they have no problem with that.
I like that, though, because I think, well, I like that for obvious other reasons, but I like that from a Greek mythology perspective, because oftentimes when we're reading stories about Greek mythology, the gods are so human in a lot of ways. Like, they are making mistakes and they are doing like weird choices that, like, you'd be like, a normal person,
they're so petty.
Exactly.
They're so petty.
But the fates kind of stand separate from that. And so when
they really do.
Yeah.
I've always thought there's sort of this kind of elegant detachment to the fates, where they're like, we can't be bought and we can't be bothered. We're just going to do our thing. And even the gods are afraid of them. Which I love the idea that there's something out there that the gods can be afraid of.
Yes, basically, like, all of Greek mythology can kind of be summarized by, like, whatever they're doing up there in Olympus, nonsense. It's all nonsense. What we're doing down here is real fucking work.
Exactly.
Now I'm picturing the fates as like the sort of office managers who like process payroll or like get like grain moved to the right place, and they watch the manipulations of like the stock market or whatever, and then they're actually a, you know, truck logistics dispatcher, like, okay, I'm sorry, if you want bleach in your Walmart, I have to do that, and like, leave me alone.
Amanda, that's why in the video game Hades, it's like literally just like an office, you know what I mean? It is one of those things where it's like, yeah, if they don't do their jobs, everything else falls into chaos, you know?
Hard to tell stories about those people, though, with what we've got. So I'm glad that your assassins, Deanna, have some investment in what's going on.
Yes, they do.
Amanda, I would love if we could take a quick refill before we start talking about the rest of Deanna's incredible work. What do you think?
Let's do it. Hey everybody, it's Amanda, and welcome to The Refill. Now, I am right now recording this actually the day last week's episode came out, because Julia and I are about to head out to Portland, Oregon. So if you joined in the last week as of when you're hearing this, thank you so much. Thank you for becoming a patron, and we'll name you next time, because as paying patrons, you are the backbone of this podcast. You're why we get to pay researcher Sally and editor Bren and social media coordinator Talia and just do this as work. So thank you so very much. And if you would like to join the likes of supporting producer level patrons, Alicia, Ann, Hannah, Jane, Lily, Matthew, Rico, like Captain Jonathan, Malachi, Cosmos, Scott, Will, and or legend level patrons, Audra, Bex, Chibi Yokai, Michael, Morgan H, Sarah, and BMEF Scotty, hey, you got to join now at patreon.com/jointhepartypod. Folks, we are sounding the klaxon that we need more urban legends. I've especially enjoyed getting to hear your voices in wonderful voicemails. So if you are feeling brave and want to send us a brief little message, a query, a short legend, hey, this creepy thing happened in my hometown, check it out. You can get us at 617-420-2344. Or if you're outside the U.S., you can always email us a voice note to spiritspodcast@gmail.com. Whether you write in, send us a voice note, or call that line, we would love to hear from you. If you've been waiting, this is your moment, y'all. I also want to tell you about one of the exciting things happening over at Multitude, which is that we are learning even more about science and the small things that have a big impact on our world with Tiny Matters. Scientists Sam Jones and Deboki Chakravarty take apart complex and contentious topics in science to rebuild your understanding. I know you don't need me to tell you that it is more important than ever that we are scientifically literate and learn about the world around us from people who are experts in their fields. And Sam and Deboki could not be better communicators about everything from deadly diseases to ancient sewers to forensic toxicology. Tiny Matters comes out every Wednesday, so check them out now in your podcast app. We are sponsored this week by Tempo, a weekly delivery service that delivers chef-crafted meals from a dietitian-approved menu fresh to your door. They serve up fast, feel-good, and single-serving meals that are all cooked up in just 3 minutes, so that no matter how much time you have, even if it's just 3 minutes, you can eat well without sacrificing taste or convenience. They also introduce new recipes each week made with real ingredients and nutrient-rich ingredients at that. I definitely don't feel like eating a lot of the time. Like sometimes I'll be like a little bit hungry, and then by the time I get around to like making food or thinking about food, my hunger is kind of passed. So I really appreciate that Tempo is really easy to just heat and eat. And you can also choose from specific dietary preferences like protein-packed, fiber-rich, or carb-conscious. I recently enjoyed their barbecue pulled pork bowl, which was over a bed of farro, which is not a grain I typically cook, but I really liked it, and it came with butternut squash and cabbage. For a limited time, Tempo is offering our listeners 60% off your first box. Go to tempomeals.com/spirits. That's tempomeals.com/spirits for 60% off your first box. tempomeals.com/spirits. Rules and restrictions may apply. And now, back to the show.
We are back, and Deanna, we love to ask our guests, what have you been enjoying lately, drink-wise? Whether it's cocktails, mocktails, coffee creations, what have you. What's been your drink of choice lately?
I was lucky enough to receive some lovely, lovely birthday presents last June that I have been stretching out.
Yeah.
One of my dearest friends in the world lives in Nashville, and there's a fantastic tea company there called High Garden. And they have the most delicious teas. And she gave me several different types, a really nice kind of random sampler of things she thought I would like. And my favorite one of them, and I'm like eking it out because I'm going to have to go order another like 7 pounds of this stuff, is one called Iron Goddess of Mercy. Ooh. Which is, right? Is that not the most badass name for a tea?
My palms are sweating. I'm like, give it to me right now.
It smells almost like coffee, which I loathe, but the flavor of the tea is phenomenal. It's smoky, and I don't know how to describe it except to say it's like a chewy tea. It's like, it's got so much body. Ooh. And it's super rich, and it's a little bit smoky. I love Lapsang Souchong, but if that's too smoky, then Iron Goddess of Mercy will absolutely kick you in the balls, but not with smoke like Lapsang does. So I am smitten with this tea, but you've got to like it is bracing. It will open your pores and you will see God. It is gorgeous.
Challenge accepted.
But
I've opened the tab.
But do not sweeten it. I beg of you, do not sweeten it. You need the whole full-bodied Iron Goddess of Mercy experience. And the fun thing is, when you order it from High Garden especially, it comes in these really cute little they're little balls of tea that almost look like pearls.
Ooh.
But they're dark. They're almost black. And so
they look almost like boba bubbles.
Oh, interesting.
It's what they've done with the leaves, and it's just extraordinary. And they're a fantastic tea company, and I love supporting local businesses. So go hit up High Garden Tea in Nashville.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, Deanna, the first book that brought me to your world and your writing was A Curious Beginning, the first in the Veronica Speedwell series. And I would love to ask you all about what drew you to the Victorian period and how much of the like bloody, mysterious, Jack the Ripper, etc., urban legends of the Victorian period have inspired the world that is now going on 10 books deep.
Oh, I have always been fascinated with Victoriana. I got my degree many, many, many moons ago. I double majored in English and history, and I went to a university in Texas that had a really small history department. So basically, you just had to take what courses they offered. There was no such thing as like, they didn't do independent study. They were not super concerned with what women were doing, as in there was not a single course that talked about women. It was all, what are the men doing? Men do war. I'm going to shorthand for you. Men do war. My senior thesis was on like the armored tactics of General Patton. Yeah, I am not your armored cavalry girl, but that's what I had to write about. So when I got out of college, I was really interested in the stories I hadn't been taught. And I had the skills at that point to go looking for them. And so I started exploring different areas where women were doing what I thought were just interesting and unexpected things. And one of these weird little niche areas that I ran across was the Victorian lady explorers. As they're usually known. And they were doing some of the most fascinating stuff. And when I say Victorian, that's a little bit loose. You can start earlier, like with Mary Sibylla Meriam. You can go later and cover some of the women like Gertrude Bell, who are post-Victorian, but kind of this long Victorian era of women out exploring the world. And a lot of times you're talking about British women, American women, other Western European women going into areas that were being colonized. So this is not a subject that comes with no baggage to it, because some of these women were occasionally doing shitty things. But a lot of them were there because they were genuinely and sincerely interested in botany, archaeology, lepidoptery. They were interested in natural history. They were interested in visiting parts of the world and visiting cultures that were not as familiar to Western Europe. With the rise of the middle class in Victorian England, you get this whole raft of people who have a ton of money to spend, and they want to go out and kind of mimic the grand tours that aristocrats were doing 100 years before, and that all of the Napoleonic Wars had interrupted and kind of put an end to. And so they go to places like Egypt and they see the monuments of the Nile. Well, okay, everybody has gone to Egypt. And so where do you go from there when you've gone to Egypt and you've sailed up the Nile and seen the pyramids? What do you do after that? Well, maybe you go to South America and you hunt butterflies, or maybe you go to Africa and you explore the coast of West Africa, like Mary Kingsley did. Maybe you go to Hawaii, like Isabella Bird, and you ride donkeys up a mountain just because you can. And it was a fascinating source of just so many stories. Because the great thing about Victorians, if they did it, they wrote about it. Oh my God.
Not until I think LiveJournal in the late 2000s did people document their lives like Victorian explorers.
We're talking about the early stages of photography. So if they weren't with their little sketchbooks, which the vast majority of them were, a lot of them also they were experimenting with photography. They were recording what went on. They would come home and they would give lectures. They would send letters back. They would have these sort of entertainment evenings where they would do magic lantern shows, or they would just read from their journals, and they would have their friends and relatives save the letters that they had sent. And they would sit there and read those out loud to people who hadn't heard them. And so when you were going around the world and you were having these adventures, you were bringing that stuff home too. And so it kind of broadened everybody's experiences of what the world was like. And, with the advances in travel, suddenly we're not on sailing ships, we're on steamships. We can get there a little faster. A lot of these women were traveling either very slightly escorted or not at all. They were going without ladies' maids. They were going on their own. And then you have people like Nellie Bly, who are like, I'm going to go around the world with a carpet bag and a jar of cold cream.
And in less days than Jules Verne said.
Right? And the thing a lot of people don't even realize about Nellie Bly is she's not the only one who was doing it. She was in an exact race with another woman doing precisely the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so that inspired a whole new generation of female travelers. And seeing the world through their eyes was absolutely fascinating. And a part of it that I thought was really intriguing is how they used travel to throw off the limitations of what they were expected to do at home. Because if you're a woman at home and you're unmarried, and the vast majority of these female travelers were unmarried. There were some who would, go on an archaeological dig with a husband or go on a gag missionary trip with a husband. But the majority of them were traveling independently. They were on their own. And a lot of times it's because they were trying to get away from being the caregiver. Oh, you're the spinster sister, or you're the maiden daughter, or whatever. Oh, you're free childcare. You're free elder care. You're free. Oh, we have a sibling with special needs care. And it's fascinating to see how many of them had what we would recognize as psychosomatic symptoms or depression. And it disappears the second they set foot on a train, on a sailing ship, on a donkey up a mountain in Hawaii. It's gone. Like, they're doing incredible feats of physical stamina because they're free. They're absolutely free. They're answerable to nobody. And the most fascinating one that I found was a woman by the name of Margaret Fountaine. And she was a lepidopterist. And she kept diaries. She traveled the world hunting butterflies. And part of the reason she did it is because it was incredibly lucrative. You could make a superb living netting butterflies, because when there's this huge vogue for travel around the world, the middle classes are trying to establish these fantastic natural history collections, from museums to collections in their own homes, because it's what wealthy people have been doing for a long time. So it's a way of showing that you've got taste, you've got culture, you know how to seek out beautiful things and to display them, and you've got the money to do it. So you could go out with just your butterfly net, very little overhead, and a cheap ticket to, the Azores, and you could go net some butterflies and send them back and make a fortune. And that's what Margaret Fountaine did. She butterfly hunted on 6 continents over decades. She finally dropped dead on the island of Santo Domingo when she was in her 70s, butterfly net in hand. Apparently there's a plaque on a rock next to where she died.
Oh my God.
Drops dead. So she leaves her own personal collection of butterflies to a university in the north of England, along with her diaries. And as was customary, she said, please don't open my diaries for 70 years. So that, all the people I was talking shit about will be dead. Because girlfriend spilled the tea in her diaries. Right? It's like,
That's such a good reason.
No drama.
You can unearth my Twitter DMs in about Check's Watch 50 years. That's about the right time.
I nuked mine. So they hung her butterflies on the wall, and they, forgot about her journals for 7 decades. And finally somebody dug her journals out and started to read them. And it turns out that this entire time, Margaret was not just hunting butterflies. Margaret was after the D all around the world. Margaret was sleeping around all around the world.
Margaret got laid on 6 continents, baby. How many people could say that?
Go, Margaret, go.
Margaret got it done. Margaret had premarital relationships. Margaret had interracial relationships. We do not think of Victorian women sleeping with men of a different race outside the bonds of marriage. Margaret did. How many other women did and didn't write about it?
100%, or in the sort of like pathologized and criminalized way of, pursuing men of color as a predator. But a lot of these women had desire and probably had extremely hot sex with extremely hot men.
Exactly. And, Margaret was indiscriminate in her attentions to men. Sometimes they were white, sometimes they were not. And the thing that absolutely blew my mind is when you are reading her journals, it is so matter of fact when she talks about these experiences, because she would say, I was in an alpine meadow chasing a beautiful specimen of La Siamata, and suddenly Hans's hands were in my, and you're like, Hans's hands were where now? And what's it? And the way she talks about the flirtations that she was horrible to some of these men, because she would really lead them on into thinking like, it's going to happen. And then, there was one case of this poor man on a train where she spends the entire night, like kind of in the dining car, making suggestive remarks and just kind of really pouring it on. And even, letting him have a few little samples of the wares here. And then she goes and locks her cabin door. And she's like, no, I never had any intention of letting you do that. And he's like, okay, that was not clear. And I'm like, okay, Margaret, you could have been a little bit more, open about your intentions here instead of
a little bit of a tease, Margaret.
Instead of letting this poor man think.
Individually, a little bummed, systemically, rock on, Margaret.
Exactly. Like, it's problematic in its execution, but on the whole, I approve of the way
I approve this message.
Get it, girl. Or not. Or
As
not.
it were. That's feminism, baby.
Yeah, exactly. So this is who Margaret was. And the really funny thing is she would get these crushes on people, and you could see when she was using men to kind of feed her ego and her vanity when she wasn't getting her romance fulfilled by the actual object of her affections. And it made her just the most fascinating and complex and, just so full of drama, so full of drama. She is absolutely the girl in your friend group that you guys would have had a separate WhatsApp chat going about, can you believe the shit she just got up to this time? Because she is just a drama llama, completely. And I loved that for her. And so I was reading these books while I was still writing my first, because two of her journals actually were published. And they're long since out of print, but I got my hands on them. And so I was reading those as I was still writing the Lady Julia Gray series, which was my first Victorian mystery series. And I remember thinking, God, if I ever get the chance to write another Victorian series, this is my girl. She's going to be the inspiration for this character. And so a few years later, I was, my previous publisher had declined to continue the Julia Gray series, and I had moved publishers, and I was trying to come up with a project that I could use to move publishers. And I thought of Margaret Fountaine, and I went, all right, let's go. And so, in her honor, Veronica Speedwell is a lepidopterist who likes to get her a little something, something. But her rule is never in England.
Hell yeah.
Her rule is only when she's traveling, because if she doesn't, that was actually Margaret Fountain's rule.
If you do it somewhere else, the English can't talk.
Exactly. It was solely a matter of like maintaining that very proper facade of I'm a respectable woman. I wouldn't do that. And making sure people can't gossip about you. Because what you get, it's very much a what happens in Cairo stays in Cairo situation. And so that was how she lived her life. And I thought that rule makes sense. We understand why that's there. So that's Veronica's rule as well. And then that's really the only resemblance that they have is what they do for a living and what they do for fun.
I'm really picturing her like on a steamship watching England recede behind her, checking, the atlas and being like, international waters, let's go to the cabin.
Checking out the crew, checking out the passengers, going, you, it's fine.
Incredible. Oh my goodness. I'm just blown away by that whole story. That was incredible. I'm still processing, and I'm like, whoa.
Any other mythological or folkloric influences that you were excited to draw from, either in making the mysteries that Veronica solves, or just kind of building out her world as a whole? Just for me as a fan, there are, royals in disguise. There is a somewhat secret intelligence committee. There's smuggling. There's all kinds of incredible stuff that happened all the time and that I think of when I think of the noisy, briny, dirty depths of like Victorian London.
Oh yeah. I mean, Victorian London, it's layer upon layer upon layer. You've got Victoria at the top, sunk in perpetual mourning for Albert. And then you have right below that, you've got the Prince of Wales and this sort of very glittering, opulent, scandalous court that is a secondary court that he and his princess maintain. And, the Princess of Wales is very much above the fray, but all of, the Prince of Wales's friends and associates are kind of basically engaged in mate swapping because we're all out to have a good time. I think I wrote in one of the books about his famous sex chair.
Mm-hmm.
Below that, you've got the middle classes who are like, oh, we're not even going to say the word leg in public because no. And then below that, you've got a group of people who are working hard for a living, who are blue collar workers, who are trying to make ends meet. And more than 50% of those brides are pregnant on their wedding day. So they're not living by, so it's fascinating to me to look at the juxtaposition of when you change your social rank, how that changes the morality and the expectations.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, the huge story dominating so much of this in the late 1880s, in 1888 and a little bit beyond, was Jack the Ripper, because of the fact that, he stopped in November of that year, but nobody really knew that at the time. Like you kind of have to just wait and see, is he going to be done?
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the Thames Torso murders. And, there were a couple of really gory, there was a gory case in particular of a body being found on a train, which I kind of incorporated a little bit of that idea into a grave robbery.
I love a train panic. They move fast. What are they going to do to our bodies?
Oh my God. And that was another thing I found fascinating, was the technology panic of the Victorian era, how people just lost their damn minds over escalators. It's like the stairs are moving. What?
Women will have hysteria quick.
Their uteruses will just run around. And how people would step on a tram and like pass out because it was just moving too fast. They can't cope with it. But when you think about it, they had to process more technological change than any other generation in history, with the possible exception of mine. I mean, because when at the early part of that long 19th century, nothing moved faster than a horse's gallop. Nothing moved faster than a sailing ship in full rig. And your illumination, if you want artificial illumination, is candlelight. By the end of the 19th century, you've got motor cars and electricity. Now, they're not widespread, but they've been invented. Some people are using them. And in the meantime, you've had to transition through gaslight and steam power.
Mm-hmm.
And every one of those changes just brought incredible upheaval and people trying to make sense of it all. And when you've got the movement between the classes, you get all of these tensions. And I was really fascinated, and I even wrote about it in one of the books, and I can't remember which one, because you write it and you forget it.
Mm-hmm.
But it might have been a murderous relation where Veronica and Stoker, who are the two lead characters in the series, are walking through Trafalgar Square, and there is an encampment of homeless people, unhoused people in Trafalgar Square, which sounds like something that's very, very 21st century, except it was actually happening.
Mm-hmm.
And looking back at their stories and seeing how much is exactly the same, but you can also pull it all the way back, because how many Greek myths do we know about, a stranger came to town and bad shit happened.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to fear the stranger. We have to fear the person who comes and doesn't seem to have means, or maybe has a curse hanging over them, because why else are they traveling around? We're nervous about the traveler. Why?
Yeah, no, that's such a good point. And so many stories too of the travelers secretly like Zeus in disguise or Hera in disguise and stuff like that.
Right.
And not giving them due deference and violating hospitality law also gets you into trouble. So it's like we're afraid of this person, but also we have to treat them with respect is kind of this like duality that Greek mythology plays a lot with.
Yeah, and it actually plays completely into immigration today and immigration in Victorian times. It's like, oh, we have these people coming and let's treat them with respect because they're going to do the jobs we need them to do and they're the right kind of people and we're not scared of them. Oh no, these people are coming. I'm scared of them. I'm threatened by them. Let's close the door. That's not okay. And we are still talking about these questions today. And that's absolutely fascinating when you think, okay, it's been 6,000 years. We're still doing this. It's been 8,000 years. We're still doing this. Because some things just never change. And there's always that sort of, fear of the unknown. And how do you entertain angels unawares?
And I'm sure in some ways that made the transition from writing Victorian novels to modern day stuff a little bit easier for you, hopefully.
Absolutely, because nothing ever really changes. We're still grappling with exactly the same questions we were grappling with back when we were forging our swords out of bronze and telling stories around the campfire. It's exactly the same sort of thing. I always find it really interesting when you can trace a through line of a story. Like I grew up in South Texas, in Bexar County, where we have a creek called Woman Hollering Creek, and which is just like the most like redneck Texas thing you can possibly think of. Woman Hollering Creek.
It took a second for that to sink in. I'm obsessed with this place now.
Absolutely should be. It's called Woman Hollering Creek because the story goes that it's named for a woman who is weeping because she drowned her children in the creek because her husband was unfaithful. Well, that comes directly from the Mexican stories of La Llorona. That comes from Spain, and that comes from Medea. Now, are they directly linked all the way back? I don't have any idea. But the notion of I'm going to take the ultimate revenge I can on you, and then I'm going to cry some about it, and everybody else gets to listen to it and be assaulted by the violence of my emotion. Like that storyline has come directly down from Medea murdering Jason's children. And then we've got a place called Woman Hollering Creek in Bexar County, Texas, but it's the same idea. And I think that's just fascinating that as human beings, we have these little seeds of stories and seeing where they get planted, where they take root, how they fruit, how they flower, and how they get corrupted. Do they stay true? Do they turn? Like, I find that endlessly fascinating. And we could probably talk for about 7 more years.
As do we, which is why our podcast is 8 years deep and 420 some episodes, and we're still going.
I know. I looked at how many episodes there were, and I was like, I cannot say a single original thing that they will not have heard a million times.
You absolutely can.
So many original thoughts this episode.
You've in fact given us, I think, a new subtitle for the podcast, which is It's Been 8,000 Years. We're still doing this.
I love it.
Which, Julia, that's a contender. I like it.
It is. It's something we say on the show very often, which is humans have always been humans.
So
we
human.
have been telling the same stories since we have told stories, and it's kind of wild.
And it's so universal. And in a way, it just kind of makes you want to bang your head against a rock. But in another way, it's really consoling to think, look, we don't have to necessarily figure this out because people have been trying for 10 centuries, 40 centuries, and we haven't done it yet. Like maybe that burden isn't ours. Maybe that's just the meaning of what it is to be human, is to ask the question and to try to answer it.
And a core tenet of Judaism to me is Zeka. Like you have to continue the work and you have to start it, but you don't have to finish it. And that's something that I try to take forward as well. Deanna, we could talk to you clearly for another several hours, if not years. We will include links to your website and all of the books that folks can find and buy from their indie local bookstore via bookshop.org. Anything else that you want to plug or make sure our listeners know about if they love you, your perspective, and your world?
I want to come back because we didn't even talk about my vampire book.
Yeah.
Oh, we got to do that next.
It's gonna happen. We'll have you back.
No, I've got the ninth Veronica book is coming out in paperback. That is A Grave Robbery. It's got a little nod to Frankenstein in there, and it actually does deal with some urban myths. And then the sequel to Killers of a Certain Age, Kills Well with Others. And I will be on tour, hopefully in your listeners' backyards for them to come and see.
Safe to say, I think anyone who's listening who goes to one of your events will meet new friends there. It sounds like we're all gonna like each other.
Oh, absolutely. We all nerd out over exactly the same stuff. And I love that. I adore my readers for that very reason, because we were all the nerds in school geeking out over the same things. And that creates community, whether you meet them when you're 7 years old or whether you meet them when you're 70. Those are your people.
Hell yeah.
You are one of ours. Thank you so much again, Deanna. And listeners, remember, next time you are deciding whether to capture a butterfly or capture the D.
Stay creepy.
Stay cool.
Later, Saters.